Today I am joined by Gabe Lossing, and you are running for uh, 27th State Senate District.
26th.
26th,
Yep.
27th is Flint. Thank you. I figured I'd cross that one up. 26. That encompasses Lapeer, Tuscola, two other counties, Saginaw,
Genesee and Saginaw.
Genesee, and Saginaw. Okay. The Genesee part is what crosses me up because I know it like splits with Flint.
Yep.
I appreciate it. I know a little bit about you, not a whole lot. I know you're a veteran, a farmer.
Yep.
I know you ran for House 67th seat, like 2022.
Correct. Yep.
It's 67th, right?
Yep.
And the seat you're running for now is the one that Kevin Daly is vacating.
Yes. Yep. He's term limited.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And we have a question about that. So we'll just jump in. In your mind, what are the three top issues that are facing our district? If you can come up with three, if you want to do two, four, whatever, but what are the main issues we're looking at?
Yeah, I would definitely say when I got in the race, I actually, instead of coming up with my own opinion, what I thought they were, I wanted to go to the different townships all around the district and figure out what are the main issues. And definitely the number one issue that I hear about are, affordability. That's a major one. A lot of people are concerned about the data centers, the solar fields.
Yeah.
And really those I think kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, sure.
And realistically just local control. I think there's a lot of bureaucrats in Lansing that would like to take a lot of that away. So
yeah.
So I would say those are the top three issues that I've heard about. And certain demographics or different people obviously might have some different opinions,
concerns,
but
Okay. Why are you running?
So that's a very long and in-depth conversation.
Sure.
And if I'm more than willing to share it. So my story in politics really starts back in like 2004. My parents were 31.
31, okay.
So actually, I would say maybe before that, 9/11 is really what got me interested in politics. And I was very patriotic, growing up. And my parents were Republican, so that's, kind of the way I was raised. And in 2004, I went and met George W. Bush, and that was a pretty cool experience for me. And between 2001 and 2004, I was, obviously a young kid, and I really wanted to be a firefighter, seeing the firefighters on the TV. And after that experience with George W. Bush, I was like, I want to be the president of the United States one day. And at that age, I started talking, about that. And one of the things that I believed, I came to at a young age, was that I think the president should have military experience. So I started talking about joining the military. And when I was 17, my parents signed early so I could enlist. And after I graduated from high school, I left for the military just 10 days after that. And while I was in the military, you're around a lot of different opinions, a lot of different backgrounds and views. And, that really started to shape who I was. And I made, the decision. I'm a Christian. And so but I would say growing up, I went to a Christian school, Christian Baptist church. And I had to make that decision for myself when I was in the service. So that really kind of set me on my way of asking questions. And my view of our government started to change from, everything's Star Spangled Banner to, we do have some issues. And one of the things that really got me into politics was there was a discussion amongst my peers. They were talking about, what if we got orders to fire on American civilians? And I usually sit back and listen. And so they were all talking, and they started to come to the conclusion, well, we're going to have to follow orders. And that really kind of impacted me. And I said, when we swore an oath, our oath was to the Constitution, then to the president, and then to the officers appointed over us. I said, the officers aren't in line with the president, we don't obey them. If the president's not in line with the Constitution, we don't obey them. And it kind of hit me, I was maybe 20 years old, that there was no requirement. When I joined the military, there was no requirement that I had read the Constitution or studied it or anything. But here I was swearing an oath to it. And so that, um, I felt like I knew a lot, but I really started diving into, the Constitution and the founding fathers and, different things like that. And um, so when I got back from the service, um, actually the first thing I did was, I didn't even know Kevin Daly, but he was running that year. And so I reached out to him and I said, I'd like to get involved. Can I help? And he was more than happy to let me come. So I was dating my wife at the time, and we went and put up signs, knocked on doors, went to all the parades, and um, kind of just got me moving in that direction. And from there, I became a precinct delegate, got on the ballot, and and then kind of helped with different petitions, things that I believed in, and um, obviously COVID happened, and a lot of people got involved in politics, and um, I decided around maybe 2021 that I would give it a shot running for state rep. So, um, and and all of it has always been going back to my time in the service, where I think as a nation we've forgotten what good government should look like. Everybody's arguing about this and arguing about that, but nobody's even talking about their reasonings why. And so everything I've done, and a lot of people would hopefully say this about me, is that I try to bring it back to the Constitution. And you know, we could sit here and debate. There were definitely some beliefs of the founding fathers that I don't even agree with. Um, but within the Constitution, they've given us a path to change things. There is a legal way to do it. And I think that was them telling us that they weren't perfect, they were human. But when government moves fast, the minority typically ends up being the one that gets harmed. And so that's, really what pushed me into, running for state rep. And when I ran for state rep, um, I had a hard time really, I was a lot younger, breaking that down into, well, what does this mean to the average person? It's fine and great, and I think everybody should know this, but um, what about the specific issues in the area? And so as I was running, I was learning about those specific issues and how I could break them down. And um, so I would say that my mission is still there. Um, I have strong constitutional conservative views, but at the same time, I also, the Bible is clear, and Abraham Lincoln has said it: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And I definitely lean more towards a Republican and have a lot of Republican views and values. But my goal, if I were to be the state senator, would be to listen to everybody. And that's just something I don't think that's happening in our country these days. And um, that doesn't mean I'm going to agree or vote a certain way, but giving everybody the opportunity to voice their opinion at the state level, would be my job. And so everything I do, I try to um, look at what I think the founding fathers intended and try to mirror that. So I would say, that would be one of the main reasons I'm running. But to really break that down, and what I've said forever is, I'm running to secure the blessings of liberty for myself, my family, and the future generations of America. And at the end of the day, I think that's the most important thing. That's what makes the United States great, is that we have different opinions and different views, and we have the freedom to do that. So um, that's really where my heart is, and that's why I decided to run. So
I appreciate that. Um, how would residents notice a difference in this community, this area that you'd be representing if you are elected?
Um, it's a that's a tough question because I will say that, and I don't want to sound like a brown noser here, but I think Senator Daley's done, in my opinion, done a great job at uh, speaking with everybody, and I think he's done a great job at listening and representing, and that's something that I have always admired about him. We definitely don't agree on everything. I mean, I haven't met a person yet that I agree with everything on, but that's why I've always been a big supporter of him, is that he does that. And I would say maybe if there's a little bit of a difference, it would be that maybe my age would bring, I could definitely connect with the youth more, um, and be a little bit maybe more active. I mean, he's there's definitely been a shift in politics in the last 10 years or so, and um, I think I have an opportunity to hopefully get out into the community more and maybe bridge that gap that I think he definitely tried to do, but just working with everybody, and I think that's really what we need. There's It's no surprise when you turn on the TV, people are arguing and disagreeing, and nothing's getting solved. So I think that would be what would be different about me, is that I could bring that. So
Awesome. So let's talk about taxes and spending a little bit. Okay.
yeah,
Would you support cutting Michigan's income tax?
yes, I would. Yep. Um, I I would support cutting any tax. So
Where would you reduce spending, if anywhere?
so I'd have to specifically comb through the budget,
Sure.
and I definitely have some ideas here. But Article 1, Section 1 of the Michigan Constitution says, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but that government is instituted for everyone's equal benefit and security. And I think that our budgets don't match that. They're unconstitutional in many ways. Um, like there's talks of eliminating a tax for this certain group or that certain group, or giving incentives here, and I don't generally agree with that. I am a full blown. I believe in free enterprise. I believe that people are better when government stays out of the way. So,
What about, do you support surplus funds or using surplus funds for roads, tax relief? How would you use any surplus funds?
um, it's a very good question. Mainly because I'll be honest. I think there's a lot of fraud in government, so I think there's a ton of surplus. Um, and one thing that I've noticed over my years being involved is that everybody tries to throw money at things and solve issues. Um, I definitely think our roads are a fairly big issue here in the state, and that would be something that would apply to Article 1, Section 1, and equal benefit and security there. So that would probably be something I would consider.
We've struggled, obviously, like we both just touched on, uh, road funding for decades, right? Michigan is notorious for its potholes, I'd say, frankly. Um, would you support raising taxes or to improve those roads, or do you have any other ideas as to how you might go about that? Putting aside any surplus.
Um, I would not support raising taxes, and this is my opinion. I haven't done a study on this, but I really think that we should, number one, be looking into how roads are being built and repaired in the first place. Um, if there's one thing that I've learned in politics, is that money is the driver of everything. And you know, when you look at who's consistently building the roads, maybe we should be looking at and making sure that they're building them well to begin with. And another thing that I think that another major issue that I believe we have is that we have a society that's filled with instant gratification. And so, for instance, um, a realistic plan to fix the roads, in my opinion, would not be trying to tackle every single road at the same time. We need to be realistic and open with the people and say, hey, we want to get these roads. 69, for crying out loud, is horrible between here and Lansing. And, you know, I would support, making essential repairs, but cutting maybe less traveled roads, fixing our major roads, doing them right, doing them properly, that they're going to last a lot longer than they are now, and then start moving on to the smaller roads. Um, and and like I said, I think that needs to be expressed to the people, that it might seem like for the next 10 years some of the roads aren't getting done, but there's a bigger plan here. So
Let's talk about education a little bit. What changes would you make to Michigan's public schools?
education is one that I'm still learning on, and I'll tell you why. Because I grew up in a private Christian school, and I don't have a whole lot of experience within the public education system, but I do have a few opinions on some things. Number one, I think that we should be looking at maybe more aptitude testing. I think school in general is a cookie cutter thing, and not everybody is the same. I think it was Albert Einstein that said, everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it'll go its whole life thinking it's stupid. So I think that we need to apply those principles to school. And how that would look, there would definitely need to be people that have a background in education that I would, consult with on this. But, um, I just told you my opening story. I knew I didn't want to be an engineer or something like that. I knew what I wanted to do very early on. And, I think there are a lot of kids that know that, but then there's also a lot of kids that would benefit from some form of an aptitude test. And that way they would move them into the different classes they want to take. And, everybody's consistently talking about the trades. We don't have as many people going into the trades. And, um, I think that's a multifaceted issue of why that's not happening. But um, I definitely promote more of those uh, career technical, things. And um, I also know that many people are talking about children not having reading at their right grade level, and how we solve that. I'll be honest, I don't know that I have a great answer for that, but it's definitely something I think should be looked into. So
Yeah. So I know it's not your wheelhouse, but do you have any thoughts on schools of choice or charter schools, things like that?
yeah, in general, if I were to blanket say it, I'm for school of choice. I'd have a couple concerns with the way that works. Um, Number one, just the way the funding is. So because of the different millages and things, you're kind of taking money out of one area and putting into another. But in general, I'm I believe that the parents should be the ones deciding for their where their kids go and things like that. Um,
That's a good leads me to another question, which is what role do you think parents should have in determining curriculum or just influence in the school system?
um, I am 100% for the parent uh, having a say in everything that their child does. Um, that being said, I think when we homeschool our child, we will homeschool all of them. Um, we are making that choice for us to be able to do that. And there is a certain amount of, when you send your kid to a public school, there's other parents that have a say in the curriculum. There's teachers that have an opinion. Our Constitution does allow for the government to study these things, and um, so I think it's at some point when the parent decides they're going to send their child there, they have to understand they're not going to get every single thing they want. But if you have school of choice, you'd be able to pick and choose different things like that. So, but I will always go back to, I think it's the duty of the parent to raise their child. So
Yeah. Talk a little bit about economy, jobs, things like that. We're in a semi-rural area. I think you're fairly rural, right?
hmm
How do you bring jobs to an area like this or stimulate the local economy?
yeah, this probably won't be an answer you'll hear from most people, but I don't believe it's the government's job to do that. I believe it's the government's job to stay out of the way. Um, so, you know, that being said, I don't support government picking winners and losers, tax incentives for things. Um, when you look at a lot of the issues we do have, government already created the problem. And so people think we can bring in government to solve the problem. And I generally don't think that ever is the case. So,
Does that include small businesses, or is there something that you might have in mind to help them?
um, I, maybe a little more context.
Well, I get what you're saying. Basically, you're pro enterprise, free market, right? Just step back and get out of the way of your government. Um, but we do see these mom and pop stores getting devoured by the Walmarts of the world, right? And I think when you go to a place like, say, the city of Lapeer, what makes it great is that you don't get that. You get these wood chips, you get vinyl. You don't have TGI Fridays, right?
Yep.
So I guess I'm looking to see if you have any ideas on how to like help a little city like Lapeer or any other little city in your district, those small businesses in particular, to help them succeed.
Yeah. I would say that number one, I think the city's done a fairly good job as far as what the vision of the city is, and their ordinances and zoning ordinances and things like that. Um, but I'd like to state that when when most people say that they're free market or they're free enterprise, they really aren't.
Okay.
Uh, so, for instance, when we talk about Walmart, um, and I told you earlier, I think that money is the driving factor of most things. You know, you have companies like Walmart that can lobby the government for certain regulations and things, and that gives them an advantage on the small business. Um, and that is what I'm against. So I'm not anti Walmart. I am not anti the small grocery store. I am pro everybody having the same, equal playing field on that. And when you look all around the country, I don't think that's happening. And I've said this to a lot of Republicans that um, I think for years the Democrats have been talking about that corporations are billionaires and corporations are creating these problems. And there's a running thing that a lot of Republicans will say, which is, uh, none of your problems are because somebody else is a billionaire. And I don't actually necessarily agree with that because, um, I mean, that's a simple Google search. You can see that they're lobbying the government and they are using their money to influence the government. And we're supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, not a government of the biggest donor. And many politicians work that way. They you know, are consistently taking money from certain groups. We see uh, Democrats and Republicans in the state of Michigan that consistently take money from Consumers Energy, DTE, and I'm not anti either one of those. But how can you expect me to represent the people over those companies if I'm taking money from them? So I look at that with realistically everything, and a lot of people might think this is like an ancient way of thinking, but this is these are foundational principles that, um, you know, right from the passing of the Constitution, you had people that were working against it. Um, Ironically, one of them was the one that helped write it, Alexander Hamilton. Um, But uh, when when I talk about these things, a lot of people, they can't imagine that, or um, well, that'll never happen again. Well, it happened before, and I think it can happen again. And unfortunately, you see a lot of people that get into government that maybe have the same values or principles, and the way that the people react to that sometimes creates the issue. Um, because typically, when you're involved in politics or in a certain position, you get a point of view that not everybody gets. And I also think, not to get on a rabbit trail here, but I think that's another big issue we have with legislators and people in government, is that they don't take the time to explain to the people, hey, I voted no on this, or I voted yes on this, and here's the reason why. And I don't want to put it all on the government officials, because I know that sometimes I'll spend hours writing my point of view, a post and detailed, and I'll get like 5 likes, and then I'll make some little statement on social media and 100 likes. Um, it's a give and take, and I believe that another good principle of government that I believe is that government is always a reflection of the people, and which is why I never get offended if I lose an election, because you know maybe I wasn't the right person to represent that, those people. I do believe in this instance I have the majority values of the people, but election day will sort that out. Um, so I really am a proponent of that mindset of, if we can get government out of the way, let people um, compete freely, and not sit here and be like, I'm for the free market, but then you're also giving tax incentives to bigger companies. Um, that's generally what I believe.
Excuse me. Yeah, quick water break, right? We'll talk a little bit about healthcare and that kind of thing if you're okay with that. So, do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts on like how Michigan can improve mental health services in particular? We're definitely since COVID seeing like a spike with that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Um, Mental health is something that I'm actually very passionate about. I have a few friends that have, you know, committed suicide from the service, and um, and I could go very long on my opinions of PTSD and things like that, but um, you know, from 2020 to now, I feel like our whole culture has changed, our society has changed, and I think we're starting to get back to this a little bit, which is very good. But um, it used to be that people would get together, people
Mm-hmm.
would do more social
Right.
things, and I think that that's very important for everybody, um, but specifically people that need that extra support. And how government plays a role into that, um, completely, I'm not 100% sure with everybody. But I like to look at like our law enforcement, our firefighters. Um, they they have to jump through all of these hoops to basically prove that they have PTSD before they can start receiving the care for that. I think that's just absurd. Anyone that spent, in my opinion, if you're a firefighter and you've been to one car accident
Yeah.
scene,
Any first responder, right?
any first responder, law enforcement, um, and I think as far as on the government side, instead of, and we're going into healthcare here realistically, because a lot of it is health insurance policy that is making it so hard for them to jump through hoops. But I definitely think, and I know the Lapeer Sheriff's Department, they've kind of implemented more of like a, I don't want to say a buddy system, but where they can all talk together and get together. And I think that's huge. That's why there's veteran groups out there. They get together and talk about things. But you have some people that are more reclusive and don't want to join in that. And a better outreach, letting them know that these services are available. There's help there. So
Yeah. What are your thoughts about what this state could do with the opioid epidemic? Just all the overdose deaths we're seeing, that kind of thing. And um, what are your thoughts on like harm reduction, that sort of approach? Do you support it, or do you think there's another avenue that we should take?
um, are you saying like as far as them prescribing that to begin with?
Well, no, I mean you can look at it however you want to. I think we both agree that we have problems across the state as far as substance abuse issues, right? We have
Yeah.
a lot of people overdosing, and even aside from that, some of the drugs out there now, people are getting skin necrosis, right, and having to have limbs amputated. Then you see things like cocaine and meth that aren't necessarily going to have that type of impact, but it's still just something our society is really battling right now, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas as far as how you'd like to see that tackled?
Well, I'm going to do two things here. The first thing I'm going to mention is that I think that my personal belief and what I feel like I've witnessed throughout the years is a lot of people get addicted based off of their prescription drugs, and um, whether it's the insurance isn't helping pay for things and they start seeking things elsewhere, or maybe they were kept on something too long. Um, I think a lot of issues start there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice what I preach, and I think it's more my job to listen. So I'd be curious to see what your opinion is, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with me.
It is, yeah, wow. Okay. So it is tough. I will say I do street outreach and case management for the homeless in Oakland and Macomb. My older brother does a lot of harm reduction in Detroit. You can make a case, I think, for some cost benefit analysis to certain things. For example, like a needle exchange, right? Might prevent somebody from getting myocarditis who doesn't have insurance, who then we all pay for their 40 days in intensive care, right? So that is one thing I think people should consider. Um, I think it's tough, right? I think if we had a good solution, we wouldn't see the problem
Right.
that we do. For me, I was involved in that specialty court. I was the first drug court graduate of Lapeer County back in, I think, 2021. Um, a lot of things just had to come together. I was just tired. I was lucky that I hadn't already overdosed and died. I was lucky that I hadn't been imprisoned, you know, and I was very motivated to be there for my son and just as we say in that 12-step type community, sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we always can help everyone. And I don't know that I have a good answer for it, but I do have the personal experience, and man, I wish we did, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like you, curious to hear what people think about it, because uh, like in my work, and I've just had so many people. You've had veterans who, um, you said, succumbed basically to their personal demons, right? And I've had so many people I've known, whether through the type of work I do or just in my life, that um, either overdosed or just a lot of people have passed away. So I'm kind of like you. It's hard to know what the solution is, but I think we need to keep trying to find it. You know.
Yeah. I from a personal and not really a government point of view, but I mentioned earlier I'm a Christian, and uh, when I was growing up, you'd hear a lot of people say not to, know, a homeless person on the street asks you for money.
Yeah.
They're just going to take it and go buy drugs and alcohol. You're enabling them.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that giving money from my wallet to somebody is about the money.
Yeah.
I think it's about the compassion.
Yeah.
And, when you look at, like you said, you were motivated to make that decision. And there are people that uh, just that instance of knowing, hey, somebody cares,
Yeah.
that might be enough to tip them over. And I know that's not a big government
No,
solution, but
I'll tell you why I like that answer. And I've talked to schools a few times. I've talked to groups, and one of the hot takes maybe that I give that I think makes some people stir in their seat a little bit is I'm not a big proponent of the idea of tough love, right? Now, I tell people if you and I are brothers and you're trying to help me get on my feet, you think I'm on the right track, so you're letting me stay with you for a little while to get on my feet. And then you find I rob your kid's piggy bank, right? It's one thing to be like, I have to put boundaries in place between us and you and my family to protect us, right? I
yeah,
think that's good. I think healthy boundaries are good. I don't like when people characterize it like, I need to do this for you. I need to let you go die in a trap house or get arrested or get murdered because that's what's best for you. I agree with you. I think I'm not here today were it not for my parents never giving up, right?
yeah,
And believe me, they wanted to. I'm sure they wrestled with it more than I even know. And I don't fault anybody who's made that tough decision. And this is a tough thing to say because I know sometimes people who hear that implemented the tough love and then the person they love never made it back. So I'm also not trying to cast stones at anybody because it's tough.
it is
Like
tough.
it's
Yeah,
not that's been the theme of this part of our discussion, right? It's like if that's a tough thing to answer because there's so much responsibility on the individual to want help. I think just having the supports for them when they want it is key. Drug court did help me a lot. But I think everybody is so unique that it's hard to say what is going to help them. For me, I went out of my way to pursue addiction, right? Like my father was a Presbyterian minister, and I was in the suburbs, and I got as addicted to the lifestyle as the drugs, right? So I was lucky that when I was ready to quit, I had a support system. I had that external accountability at drug court for a while, and it's still like an everyday thing. I think most people will tell you, like, I don't think you ever cross the finish line if you're someone like me. I feel like I'll never go back to that lifestyle. Um, but even like prescriptions you brought up, I've recently like kicked certain prescriptions just because I felt like that was in my best interest. But it's still the same. My mind and body, whether the doctor prescribed it to me or not, is still going through this healing process because my mind and body didn't know that it came from a doctor and not the street, right?
yeah,
Still the same deal. So yeah, I do appreciate that answer actually a lot. That I've also agreed if I see someone on the corner, yeah, what they do with their money is up to them, right? If I give it to Once I give it to them, it's kind of on them, but it's the act of seeing them as a human and treating them like a human that I think is important.
yeah,
This is going to be in your wheelhouse, I'm pretty sure. Let's talk about agriculture
yeah,
and rural issues a little bit, right? So you're a farmer. What concerns do you hear from farmers nowadays,
yeah. So I'll
or
give
have
you
yourself, I should say, right?
I'll give you a little bit of background about agriculture. Agriculture is something I kind of stumbled into. Growing up in this area, I baled hay, and I enjoyed doing it, but it was never something I thought I would end up doing. And um, when I first started dating my wife, um, the major fields were getting farmed out, and we kind of just homestead kind of a thing and started doing produce. And next thing you know, we've got too much. So we were also making maple syrup and way too much of that. So we started taking stuff to the farmers markets, and um, it turned into a passion of both of ours. And so we've steadily over the last decade kind of grown that. And we've got roughly 4,000 Christmas trees. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, we'll be selling those. And we're growing the syrup usually every year, and then growing produce, our produce every year. So um, But the number one thing that concerns me is, uh, as a first generation farmer, which is what I like to call myself, you have a hard time sometimes feeling like you fit in. There's people out there that they're sixth, seventh generation farmers, and they've got, we have 80 acres, and but that's nothing compared to most farms these days. And so when I announced I was running, and said I was a farmer, it was a news and discussion, actually. There was a comment that said, "Did he win the lottery? He must be a millionaire to get into farming." And that's my number one concern about agriculture, is that, um, I know a few people around my age that are in agriculture, but the average farmer, I think they say, is 63 or 67 years old. And um, I've got my opinions on the way I do things. I don't use chemicals or anything like that. But I think, again, in agriculture, you see these farmers that are, I'm a no-till guy, I'm a, traditional cultivation, whatever. And I support all farmers. We can have our different opinions, but America needs farmers. Our state needs farmers. We're the second most diverse agriculture state in the United States, just behind California. And but when you look at what are the major issues farmers are seeing, well, it's the same issues the rest of us are seeing. But going back to, uh, there's one exception I'll typically make for a subsidy, and that is for agriculture, because the government created that problem. The reality is if farmers were selling things at a fair market value, not everybody would be able to afford steak or
How did
whatever.
elaborate a little bit on how the government created that problem?
They control commodity prices and things like that. You know, specific, well, tariffs, and whether you're for them or against them. They have had an effect, I believe, for sure, on
Are you
agriculture.
for them or against them?
Um, Let me finish this, and then
Sure,
I'll
absolutely.
be more than willing to talk about that.
Yeah.
So it's really the expense of everything. Machine costs are through the roof. Gas, oil, fertilizer, everything. And so the government is really playing a big hand in this. And so tariffs, say you plant your soybeans in the spring, and then tariff prices on China get raised, and then when you go to sell it, maybe they're buying from somewhere else. Farmers can't control those things. And so farm subsidies are something that I wish we didn't have to do, and I think we could get to a point where we don't have to. But that's not really for the farmer. It's for those of us that want to eat. And so that would be maybe my only exception there, because I believe agriculture is national security. So, um, but to sum up major things, it's the cost of everything. If we can get the cost of everything down, not only fuel, not only equipment, but land, I believe we need to stop foreign nations, any of them, from buying our farmland and buying up our land. That's one of my concerns about data centers and solar fields, is it's taking up more land and driving the cost of things up. Um, and then even property taxes. I'm a strong proponent of eliminating property taxes. I have some concerns about doing that super quickly, but um, I think that's something we should definitely be working towards. And then to tariffs, I'll talk about that. Um, and this is very unpopular to say, but I'm against tariffs. Not completely. Um, as far as, like, I'm not against there being some sort of tariff, but number one, I don't believe the president should be raising and lowering tariffs. I mentioned earlier that the founding fathers were adamant on our government moving slow and checks and balances, um, and I'm not necessarily saying this is all 100% Trump's fault. I think Congress has shirked their duty in many ways. Um, but when you look at high tariffs specifically, Um, you know, I don't think most people that say, "Oh, they're great," back when they first started happening a year ago, haven't really looked at the history of tariffs. Everybody, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the United States. It was a tariff on tea and other goods that caused us to, move or to, declare our independence.
Sure,
Yeah. And it was what? Taxation without representation. I firmly believe in Congress. There's many issues with Congress, but I can get a hold of my congresswoman much easier than I could get a hold of the president, no matter who's sitting there. There's a reason the founding fathers did that. You fast forward to 1928, the tariffs. They were originally called the tariffs of 1928 tariffs, and then they became known as the tariff of abomination. Um, and tariffs historically have done basically two things. They make big industry boom, and they make agriculture suffer. And that's history. Um, and I think we are seeing, many of that right now. It's maybe not affecting every single farmer, but um, in general, I think that is a huge factor in a lot of our prices right now. And then, you look at, and to further talk about that, I'll even say that those tariffs are really what created the Civil War. It's really what led into the Civil War. And they actually started as a joke. I don't know if you've ever read into those before, but um, it's a very interesting study. They were basically, if I remember right, they were trying to play a joke on Andrew Jackson, and it actually ended up passing, and then he had to deal with that. And he was the father of the Democrat Party, but it was actually the Republicans that were pushing the tariffs. Um, so I'm not against all tariffs. I think we should have fair trading. I think that fair trading can't be measured in dollar per dollar. Everybody's economy is different. Everything should be, worked out. And I definitely do not believe that no matter who's sitting in the White House, that it's their job to be raising and lowering tariffs. So whether that's popular or not, that's my opinion.
I appreciate it. You touched on AI data centers, which is a super hot issue right now, right? What are your thoughts on?
I've got a bunch of opinions on it. Is your camera open? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why we got to.
Okay. Um, sorry. You
No,
can edit
no,
that
it's
out.
awesome. Appreciate it.
Number one, personally, I don't want a data center anywhere near where I live. That's my personal opinion. Number two, I am also a very strong proponent of private property rights. When it comes to laws, I believe that a just and moral law prevents you from exercising your rights in such a way that affects me and my rights. So, in other words, um, if there's a data center and I don't even know about it and it's not affecting me in any way, um, I think in general you should be able to put a data center wherever. Um, However, I think that there is substantial evidence to prove that data centers are harmful to people's health and things like that. Um, I think I am more for the local, area deciding these things. And in general, um, and I feel very hypocritical saying this because I think we all use artificial intelligence, whether we know it or not.
Yeah,
But
most
I'm
certainly.
in general against. Uh, I think that we as a nation really need to decide where do we want to see ourselves in 20 years, because artificial intelligence has the power, the ability to take away jobs, um, to take away our privacy, our rights, and in some ways, I look at that and I think robotics and AI could be something that I said earlier. I'm doing this to secure the blessings of liberty for myself and my family. And I don't see any avenue of data centers and, robotics and things like that making my children's life better. And maybe that's because I grew up in the country. I love living in the country. Um, but I personally don't see the benefit there, and I could see, some serious consequences with doing that. Um, Here and now, when you look at why are they even talking about data centers in rural areas? Everybody's like, why aren't they building solar panels in the city and whatever? Well, it's simple. The money. It's easier. Number one, it's cheaper to buy farmland than it is to buy vacant city lots. And number two, it's easier to bully township boards than it is to bully a big city with a big budget. And then they're also using Public Act 233 to get around, local ordinances. So I have a lot of opinions on that. In general, I'm definitely against them. Uh, but I'm also for private property rights. So finding a good balance there is what I would do.
Sure. All right. So we'll start to bring this home a little bit. I appreciate your time. We've still got a small handful of questions. Um, and you've actually kind of already done this, but I'll still pitch it to you in case there's another answer you want to give, which would be one issue where you disagree with your own party, the Republican Party. And you haven't given one, but
Yeah, I I'm not afraid to say that I'm 100% against the war in Iran.
we were going to get there, especially with you being a combat veteran, no less, right? I
Yep.
thought, how could I not ask your opinion of that? Please tell me more.
Um, well, and I could give you a million reasons why I'm against it. The first reason is, you know, I see a growing trend that I unfortunately as you know, uh, it's been a roller coaster through our country, but I see a growing trend in everybody's for the warrior, not for the veteran. And there's common theme: 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. Um, I've been actually looking into this recently, and they say that that's not even remotely true. It's actually 44, twice as much. And somebody made the statement the other day of 9/11, we lost almost 3,000 people. No, we've lost 50,000 people because of the aftermath of 9/11. And um, my heart is for the veterans. My heart is for those that I've served with. And but not only them, but for the ones that are in now. When I look at back at myself at 17, 18, 19 years old, um, it's a weird thing to for some people to comprehend, but we wanted to go to war. I mean, that was our job. And um, looking back on how that's affected me in my life, definitely in many ways, made me, I think, a better person. But it's brought on, some struggles for me. And um, looking at my friends that have, committed suicide and friends that are struggling now, uh, I sit here and every day I ask myself, what was the purpose of that? And I think that there are 20, 20 years of the global war on terror veterans that many of them are asking the same questions. You know, why did we, why did I lose my friends for this? Why did we go here? Why did we go there? And, we had this opportunity to pull out of the Middle East. And, there's a growing, I don't want to say growing, there is a faction of the Republican Party and even some of the Democrat Party that um, they promote this global policing, situation. And, um, we, I believe our budget, our military budget, defense budget is $850 billion.
Yeah.
The next closest one is China with 380 billion.
I think we exceed the entire world combined after us.
We
And I
do.
think Trump wants to take it to 1.5 trillion.
He does, and I'm going to be very frank here because um, one thing that you'll never get out of me is anything but the truth. And I try to be careful the way I say things, but um, right now in Congress, they have the Major Richard Starr Act. Have you heard of that
No,
before? Um, the Major Richard Starr Act would allow veterans that were medically retired with combat injuries to receive their retirement pay along with their VA pay. And this isn't an entitlement, or this isn't a benefit. This is an entitlement that, when I joined the military, um, I made an oath. I made a covenant with this nation that I would follow my orders even to death. But the country made this agreement back with me that they would take care of me. If I made it home and I had issues, they would take care of me. And every single veteran made that same covenant, and with the nation. And right now, we have some Republicans that are in the Senate that are holding this up, and they're worried. And this blows my mind. They're worried about the $1 billion a year that this is going to cost the United States. We're spending that a day in Iran. Um, And if you look at who Major Richard Starr was, he was, I believe he had cancer, and uh, basically he was not getting all this pay that he should have been, and ended up passing away, from his illness. And but when you look at this, there's 54,000 veterans that are combat wounded, injuries from war, um, that they're being robbed. It's not that we're not adding something; we're reinstating something that once was there. And you know, there's a lot of different views and opinions, and I don't claim to speak for all the veterans, because I meet veterans that have a great experience with the VA, and I'm happy for them, and I'm glad that's happening. Um, I've had mixed experiences. I just waited 2 months for an appointment. It was yesterday or the day before, and I had no idea what the appointment was for. When I logged on, it was online. He said, "Do you know what this appointment's for?" And I said, "No, I thought you were telling me." And he said, looked, and he said, "I think it's just a clerical issue." So I've waited 2 months, and in my opinion, I don't think the VA is getting better. I think it's getting worse. Um, I think that, in general, we have a growing amount of people that are increasingly becoming anti-veteran, um, and I think that's a shame. The reality is, I may be only 31 years old, but when I came back from Afghanistan at 20 years old, I believe, and I don't believe this for myself, but for every other veteran out there, their opinion matters on the war. And um, so within my own party, there's a lot of people that are for this war in Iran, and some have even been nasty to me for having my opinion. Um, but I was there. I was in the Middle East. I saw things that the president hasn't seen. I've seen things, and there's many veterans that have seen way more than I have. Um, why we're there, I can't 100% tell you why. I know I don't know all the details. I know I don't know all the facts. Um, and maybe I'm wrong, and we do have a good reason to be there, but not at the expense of taking care of our veterans. And that's really where my heart is, because we have to, going back to the mental health crisis. Um, it's just an absolute shame to me that we have veterans that are homeless. We have veterans that aren't receiving the care that they should. And Um, I believe there's a lot of youth like me. Um, One of the things I believe Trump ran on was no new wars. And there's people that rebrand it and they say, well, we've been fighting them for 47 years. And I don't think they're going back far enough. Um, I'm pro the United States 100%. If you attack us, I'm pro war. Um, and I basically follow a mentality of William Tecumseh Sherman, which was he believed that if we're going to fight war, no rules of engagement, no rules of war, make it as fast and as terrible as possible because,
They certainly don't follow the same rules of engagement.
right. Well, and because the reality is most Americans can't even comprehend what war is, which is why I think we keep having so many endless wars. Because if you make everybody so sick of war, they don't want to, they're not so eager to jump back into it. And, I think, that's something that people don't want to understand is that there are 20 years of veterans in this nation that are sick of war and feeling like, well, what was any of this for? We were told there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We were told all of these things about Afghanistan, and none of it has come true. And you look at when we pulled out of Afghanistan. Um, I know that it bothered me and still bothers me and affects me, but there's thousands of other veterans, so there's strong opinions on it. Mine's a very strong opinion. I This is why, and Congressman Tom Barrett, right from here in Michigan, he was one of the congressmen that voted basically to have Congress actually vote for this war. And I firmly believe in that in the same way as tariffs. Um, the when there are people from my district that are, if they're going to be sent to war and they're going to, be killed, my congressperson needs to feel that. Person in the White House, they're not going to have that personal connection. That's the way our government works. Is if we really want to, have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, then our representatives need to be, directly related to them. Does that kind of answer some of
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, for sure. Um, if Donald Trump asked for your endorsement in a future election, would you give it to him?
Wow, well, that really depends on who he's running against.
That's sure. In a
Um,
vacuum, I guess. And I know that's tough.
yeah, and it's tough, and I'll say this right here. You know, I believe in telling the truth more than winning, and most politicians won't do that. I've never been an extreme fan of Trump. Uh, I think he's done some good things. I think there's a lot of things that he says and ran on that I was for. I think we should definitely secure our borders. I think that most Democrats believe in that. But I don't necessarily think that he wasn't my first pick. Um, I have a hard time because when people well, they'll straight up ask me about Trump. Republicans will, and I always tell them the same thing. When Trump supports the Constitution, I support Trump. When Trump doesn't, I don't. And anybody that disagrees with that is either ignorant of the way our country should run, or they know that and they're purposely being a traitor because we all, whether we like it or not, owe an allegiance to the United States Constitution. Um, and I, like I said, it would really just depend on who he was running against, but I don't think I would.
So I want to revisit a quote I found from yours in the paper after right before you ran as a write-in, right?
Okay.
You wrote, when I decided to run for state representative almost 2 years ago, it was because I wanted to end political games and truly serve the people. Unfortunately, this was a very crowded race, and the politicians in Lansing decided to meddle in it instead of letting candidates do the work themselves and letting truly the best person for the job win. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, you're really trying to get me in trouble, aren't you? And it's good because I've uh, there are a lot of things that happen in politics that um, people refuse to talk about, and my team talks about this consistently. Uh, in my state rep race, number one, I to talk about that specifically. When I first filed to run for that, it was the 82nd district,
Yeah,
all
it's
of
been
Lapeer County.
redistricted since.
It was redistricted. They pulled one township from Tuscola. Just so happens to be where Representative Green lives. Um, and this isn't necessarily to do with him. When I ran, there were 8 people in my race, and one of them was renting in the district. Did live here at some point in time, but was moved back from California, um, and would specifically go to doors that I already had been at, had signs at, and he would go there, knock on their door, tell them whatever lie about me, and sometimes get signed on whatever. Um, I can't 100% prove this. Uh, I think I could if I really did the work. One day, there used to be a day I could. I just don't know that I have the stuff to show you right now. But he was paid definitely to run, and the reason that this consistently happens, people look at the party, whatever, and I don't know the way that the Democrats do. I've talked to a few of them, but in the Republican Party, um, the caucus in Lansing really uh, protects their own. And so obviously Representative Green had tons of money from them. Um, but this guy was actually being paid by another state rep from outside of our district, the other side of the state, that wanted to be the Speaker of the House. And there's many Republicans that really like this guy, and in some ways I kind of like him too for certain things. Um, for whatever reason, he thought that nobody that was already in the race would vote for him for Speaker of the House, and never asked me or anything, but that's what they do because they will specifically meddle in these elections for the ultimate goal of we're going to have the majority and I'm going to get elected. So that was one of the major things I was talking about there. My race in 2022 was very interesting. When I first got in, I didn't think I'd even remotely come close to winning. I was, especially when they redistricted and Phil Green got in there, and then Chris Tusky was running, and he's a really great guy.
He finished second, just
Second.
a little bit ahead of you, right?
Yep.
And we're talking the primary. You fell just short.
Yep.
Made okay.
And yeah, so the reason we decided to do the write-in campaign was, and many people don't talk about this, which this is something that bothers me. Republicans are real big on election integrity, but for some reason only at the national level. When I ran for state rep, that day on election day, that was the only day of the entire year and a half of me running where I thought I might actually win. And that was because we were the only people consistently at, I had tons of volunteers at the polls. People were coming in, we're voting for you, blah, blah, blah.
Are you talking August primary? Or,
yes,
okay.
I think it was maybe August 6th that year. Okay. And however, townships some of the townships that I expected to perform the best at, um, I think there was, if I remember right, like 11 or 12 precincts that didn't even start voting until almost noon. One of them was actually my township because they received uh, absentee ballots, which wouldn't go into their machines. They weren't programmed for it that day. So when I sit back and I look at it, I think it was under 400 votes. Um, when you spread that across my strong areas, and I'm not necessarily saying there was a sinister thing to this, but something obviously happened, and I definitely believe that should have had a re-election for every single one of those precincts. Um, you know, there's people on my campaign to this day that believe I won. Um, so between the meddling of obviously Lansing, the meddling of this individual state rep, there's always going to be people, and people have the right to do this. There are people in this county that don't like me, um, and they're helping another candidate, and that's fine. I'll be honest. I think a lot of people that don't like me is because I've tried tried to hold them accountable for corruption, and um, so yeah, I think people definitely meddle in the elections, and it's not just at the national level. Um, I didn't think I was going to bring this up, but I'm sure maybe you're aware of 2024 Mayfield Township, the clerk and the supervisor that were taking signs, and um, that actually there's a lot of people that are unhappy with me because I wasn't even really involved, during that time. But there were two candidates. I didn't know them, and I knew what it was like to be that candidate that just wants to make a difference, just wants things to be right. And they were getting their signs destroyed, thrown in the dumpster, um, and nothing happened. So I stood up for them. Wasn't anything major, and some people have said, well, if you were going to run again, you probably shouldn't have done that. But I think that's what makes me different is I care more about what's right and wrong instead of winning. I'm doing my best to win, obviously, but I didn't lie to you about how I feel about Trump and and tariffs, and I just have to believe that the people see my genuine side there, and but it's a huge issue that I'm even facing, in the state senate race right now is that um, the people the people don't have as much of a say as they think they do and who gets elected. Um, and and there's many reasons why, but dishonesty is huge in all facets of politics. Um, and telling the truth or trying to correct things that have been said sometimes doesn't win you any points either. So, does that kind of
Yeah,
answer the
no,
question?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Give you two more.
Yeah.
Um, what is one promise you'll make to voters that they can hold you accountable for in 4 years?
I won't make any promises on accomplishing anything because that's the number one thing that you can tell somebody doesn't know what they're doing or they're purposely lying to you. I'm one vote in Lansing. I will make promises of things that I'll fight for, which I have limited government and the Constitution, constitutional conservative principles. But I would say if there's one thing that people can bank on from me is that I'll talk to anybody. Um, you will always get a fair shake with me, whether you are Walmart or Brian's Market, whether you're the big landscaping company or the small one. Um, I will not work for, I will work with the caucus, but not at the expense of the people of this district. I will work with, uh, other businesses in the states and everything, but not at the expense of, um, the people of this district. And I firmly believe that, um, I try to treat everyone the same, whether they're a CEO or a janitor, the the person that can't help me at all or will never donate, maybe doesn't even like me, doesn't support me. I promise that I will still be a representative of that person to the person that maybe donated to my campaign and supports me, equally. So,
And what is something voters think they know about Gabe Lossing that they're wrong about?
which voters?
You choose.
um, I think maybe I kind of touched on it with that one, which was, um, like I said, I definitely lean more towards Republican in my own thinking, but um, when there are people, you'll knock on their door, and if you tell them, "Hey, I'm the Republican," because I'm not running for state senate technically. I'm running for the primary, the endorsement, and so I'll tell them, and some people will just slam the door in my face or whatever. And I think that a lot of people, maybe it's not because of just me, it's just because of the way politics are. They think you're a Republican, so you agree with every single thing that the party does. And I'm an independent thinker. Not only am I an independent thinker, but I make my decisions slowly. I listen to everybody, and um, I don't just shoot things off the cuff as far as I'm for this, I'm for that. I actually want to create real solutions. So, if there are people out there that think, well, he's Republican or whatever and doesn't care about me because I'm a Democrat, I would say they're wrong. I do care.
Thank you for your service and your time with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.